I mic'd? Can you hear me all right? All right. Thanks for coming out here. Like you were told, this is my second time here. Right here at R.J. Julia's in Madison, Connecticut. I was going to apologize. I brought my son Dewey with me, which meant that I unfortunately can't tell all my cool stories. But then I see that there are several other children here. And I do want to tell the parents that if you love your children, you won't let them read my new book until they're about 15. There's some pretty heavy-duty stuff in there. Has anyone read the book yet? 1, 3. Is there anyone here who is not a wrestling fan? One person? All right. Okay. Well, you know, I have this theory, and I just shared it upstairs. I said, I think some people who are not wrestling fans are reading the book, but they're not brave enough to venture to places where wrestling fans congregate. So I do believe that you guys are scaring off some of the readers, but that's all right. Glad to have you here. This was supposed to be my last stop on the book tour, and then the lights went out all across the Northeast, so my Long Island signing has been moved back a little bit into September. But this is my 24th stop here, and I set about with this kind of ambitious goal of never repeating the same stories, never doing the same talk twice, which made it a lot of fun for me and made it a little bit challenging. But I'm kind of out of things to say. I had said that the great thing about this book is that there's so many themes running through it. And for those of you who actually read it, you might find out that's true. And it does give me a chance to talk about a lot of different things. And I thought that was great because I dreaded being like the politician, delivering the stump speech every stop of the way. And I thought this is good because I can say something different at every stop. And that I wouldn't get tired of talking about the book. I was wrong, because I am officially tired of talking about my book. Does that happen? Right? That happens, right? Okay, yeah. This is my 24th stop. But the cool thing is, all right, is I've got another book I wrote. So this will be the first time I talk about that book. So you're getting the first talk on the 2004 tour. So you're kind of privileged. You know what, well, let me just reflect a little bit on Tatum Brown here. First off, if I'd known that so many people would be mispronouncing it and calling him Tatum Brown or T-Adam Brown, we'd be here talking about my book, Bob Brown. I never knew it, and especially you go over I've been over to England and up in Canada, where they don't have any real interest in the American Civil War, and therefore they have no reason to know about the Battle of Antietam. But it is based on, I thought it'd be cool to have my main character who had a name reflecting the single bloodiest day in our country's history. For those of you wondering, Gettysburg was bloodier, but that took place over 4 days. So Antietam in Sharpsburg, Maryland was our country's bloodiest day, and the name, I thought, whereas some people would look at it as a monument to a fallen soldier, I think the main character of this book, or at least the guy I think is the main character, Tatum Brown, the father, looks at it as like a living, breathing grudge where every day he wakes up and he kind of remembers someone who was not only killed but apparently devoured by wild boars on the battlefield. Not the best way to go. But I put on this shirt. You know, I don't get compliments on my wardrobe very often. But I started getting compliments on this, so much so that I wore it not only on the best darn sports show, period, but on Conan O'Brien. And come to think of it, I wore the Winnie the Pooh pants, because that's all. I said, I kind of talked about Pooh Bear on Leno a couple of years ago. They're like, nobody's going to remember that. So I gave the same stick, but I threw in the line about Eeyore, which actually is the killer line, but I held it back. Does anyone know the lines I'm talking about? Okay. Well, I just said that I'm going to hold back the line because there are kids here, but I said that my theory on wearing Winnie the Pooh is that people will be subconsciously nicer to you if you are wearing it somewhere. It's like a subliminal thing. Even if it was underneath another shirt, I felt like people could sense Pooh Bear's aura around them. So, especially at a time back when WWE was under a lot of fire from the mainstream media for being too, too violent, too risque. And we were, anytime I faced like a mainstream reporter at 2020 or something like that, I inevitably was wearing Pooh Bear. So if anybody is one of these tape collectors like that guy filming this thing, go back and look, and you'll see me almost all the time wearing Pooh Bear. But then I mentioned to Conan, I said, it's kind of like, it's a very strange group of people out there, or group of animals, and people at the 100-Acre Wood, because it's a very dysfunctional family. And he said, Pooh Bear has got the eating disorder, right? Piglet is paranoid, possibly schizophrenic. Owl is an elitist intellectual. Rabbit is an anal retentive neat freak. Tigger is hyperactive and has dyslexia. And then I said, and Eeyore, in addition to being manic depressive, is, I believe, latent homosexual. And I had Marilyn Manson sitting to the side of me. He's looking at me like this, and then Conan says, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Come on, Conan, you've seen how he puts his tail on." And, you guys feel free to create your own sentence using the words nail and butt, okay? But now that I've explained the Pooh Bear sweats, I'll explain this shirt. This is a jersey that I got at the Negro League's Hall of Fame in Kansas City. It's a tribute to the great Negro baseball players who didn't get a chance to do their thing in the major leagues because Jackie Robinson had not yet broken the color barrier. It's really it's a cool shirt, right? I mean, it's not very often that I spend $98 on a shirt, but I felt strongly about this. Now, the next book that I write, that I have written, that will be out, deals in some small way with the Negro Leagues. And I was driving along and went up to New Hampshire. I go about once a year. Everyone knows that I like the parks up there, right? If you've read Have a Nice Day, you know how I feel about the mountains up there. And I was thinking about the Negro Leagues. And I was thinking about baseball and the fact that this is kind of a baseball book that I've written that will be out next year. But I was a guy who didn't watch a single baseball game, maybe a couple here and there, an All-Star game, a couple World Series games, really from about 1979 to 1999. And then this guy kind of dragged me back into it. But what really got me reading about baseball and interested in the Negro Leagues was something I did in ECW. How many ECW fans here? Anyone remember the ECW days, right? There was this great promo, an interview, we call them promos in wrestling. It's become known as the Kane Dewey promo. Does anyone remember it? Yeah. Where I was asked if I could become a bad guy in ECW. And Paul Heyman said, "I know this is a career-making decision," because the fans really liked me there in Philadelphia. And it was considered to be a very difficult thing to try to turn me, like you really need something powerful to try to turn Cactus Jack in ECW. And then I thought about this guy that had this sign out there. It said Kane Dewey. Dewey at the time was 3 years old. Now he's a strapping young man, but at the time he was 3. And a cane was a weapon that the Sandman used. It was like a bamboo martial arts training device. Even though the kid had shown me the sign and asked me if it was okay to put it on, to hold it up in the air, that's all right. But when I told my wife about it, she said she got physically kind of ill. So that's what I was thinking about when I gave this interview, the Kane Dewey interview, and I considered it to be one of the 5 best things I'd ever done in wrestling. It was really powerful because I kind of went in and I channeled all the negative energy I'd had over the past several months, and I just worked it into this one great outburst of anger. And it was so convincing and so compelling that the fans believed that I hated them, that they were sick enough to write a sign that said Kane Dewey. The poor guy with the sign went into a deep depression. And he was working out at a gym, and he ran into one of the other wrestlers. And he was like, I thought he knew it was a joke. He was really down, and at that time, I wouldn't have called the guy aside and said, "Hey, come on, I'm just kidding, you know, we didn't do that type of thing back then. I remember even, you know, spitting on him when he showed up. That's not you, is it? No, it was a little bit like the guy. So a couple months went by, and I run into the guy at a rest stop, you know, on the New Jersey Turnpike there that runs between New Jersey and Pennsylvania. And he was so like shy because he knew that he destroyed my life, and he was trying to make small talk. And it turned out that this guy that I put into the Deep Depression had the world's largest private collection of Negro League memorabilia. I mean, at the time when there was no real interest in the league, you probably got it for next to nothing. And now the guy is probably worth a whole lot more than all of us put together, you know, because this stuff has really shot up in value. And as his peace offering, he told me he was going to bring me this book called When the Game Was Black and White. That had used a lot of his memorabilia in there. So the next time I showed up at the ECW arena, here he was with this present and gift wrapped. And I took it home and I read it in just a couple of days. And that was the first thing I'd read about baseball in about 15 years. So that's a roundabout way of explaining how sometimes these little things along the way can turn into pretty cool ideas later on. And even though this is a novel, Tatum Brown, I don't know how I would have written it without the benefit of this cast of lunatics that I hung out with for 16 years. You know, and one of the problems I've had, it's been very well reviewed for the most part. There have been a couple of people just outright hated it, you know. But for the most part, people have really reacted well to it. And it's been compared to, the comparison I keep getting is to J.D. Salinger's Catcher in the Rye, which I'm sure makes Salinger really happy. To John Irving, it's been compared to the guy, I can't remember his name, the guy who did a Christmas Story. You know the guy I'm talking about? Gene Shepard. Gene Shepard, and then there's a couple other people thrown in there that I've never really heard of. But there have been people who can't, they think it's really dark, and they can't believe that human beings could do things quite as low as some of the things that go on in here. I think if they had had a chance to spend a week in the WWF locker room, they probably would have been more accepting of it. Because I think I saw the highs and lows of human nature while I was there, and I saw some really great things, not just in the dressing room, but stories that I heard, and you know, the ways people acted. And I actually think that hanging out with those guys and traveling the world for 15 years was a great benefit to me as a writer. I read this biography of Bill Clinton. It's called The First in His Class, which is a very well-received biography. And it seemed to me like when he was a student at Oxford, that essentially the education consisted of traveling around Europe reading books for 4 years. And that made him a Rhodes Scholar and an Oxford graduate. And I was like, well, I kind of wandered around the world for 16 years reading books. So as strange as it may seem, I would put the education that I received, you know, up there with any university could offer, which doesn't mean you show up as a professional wrestler and you get a good education, but it does mean that if you're willing to skip the tanning bed and the gym every once in a while, which I certainly was, that there's a lot of the world that you can see along the way as a wrestler. Now, you know, sometimes I do readings from the book, but I did not bring a copy of the book. If someone wants to lend me, we'll see how this, you want to bring that up here? Okay. See, this works out. What I would do is I kind of open up at random and I see if I can find something. Like just, you want to open it up so it doesn't look like I'm opening up something. And we'll see how this works out. It's hit or miss because sometimes you get a good reading and sometimes absolutely horrible. Okay, let me see. All right, I know what I'll do. Hold on, let me just... Okay. At this scene of the book, Tatum Brown he had been upset because his neighbors, the Suglings, were putting out a pretty impressive holiday display, and he was tired of being one-upped by the Suglings, even though Tatum had been sleeping with Mrs. Sugling, which to me meant he had been one-upping the Suglings. He didn't see it that way, and he felt like he was going to need an incredible holiday display. So what he did is he hired local kids from the college to be in his live nativity scene. And at this point, they are celebrating the first night of the live nativity scene, where they've actually had camels out on the lawn, and they've had cows, and they have actors and things like that. But he's trying to find a way to make the nativity scene even more convincing, and that's where we join it. And now what I want you to keep in mind is that this story takes place in Cortland, New York, in 1985. I was in Cortland, New York in 1985. So this is the part in the book where I make my special cameo appearance. Are you ready? All right. Let me see. Okay. Tatum was not so easily swayed. You know how much I'm paying these Cortland kids, he asked. Holly shrugged her shoulders. Tatum decided to answer his own question. $12. $12 an hour. 3 times more than they make at the local fast food joints and bars, and double what they'll make as gym teachers in the real world. Oh yeah, he's fired, my dad reiterated, because Joseph had been smoking cigarettes in the manger, trying to pass it off as if he was just exhaling steam, but they were smoking butts, which is not in keeping with the historical Joseph. You'll need to find a new Mary too, Holly said. Why? Tatum asked. Because she said she needs to start studying more, says she can't spare the time. Damn. Holly continued. Now as for the wise men, they're supposed to be Middle Eastern, right? I guess, Tatum said, but wasn't one of them a black guy? Well, those guys look like they just got off a bus from Long Island. Holly, Tatum said, come on, give me a break. I'm not exactly drawing talent from the University of Karachi here. I mean, let's get real. I could search the whole college and not find 3 wise men. Look, there's a perfect example. My father pointed to the window, and we all looked out at a large figure walking in the driving snow. About 6'4", maybe 230. Remember, this is 1985. Dressed only in jeans and a cut-off red flannel. Look at him, my dad said. His parents sent him off to college, and he's too stupid to even wear a coat. There we go. That's the rating. All right. So I don't know how many books I will write, but I do know I'll make a cameo appearance in every one of them as long as I get to be a loser. Okay? Anyone have any questions? I know we got a line of people outside. It's literally wrapped around the building. It's not wrapped around the building yet? But we do have some people outside. It'll be kind of quick, and then we'll start the signing. But
I got a question. Yeah, the children's books that you've written. I never even heard. I didn't even know you'd written children's books.
Yes, and this is a children's book, Tatum Brown. So if you have an 8-year-old, it'd be a perfect stocking stuffer. Now I was here a couple years ago doing the Christmas book. Yeah, I've done a couple children's books, and actually I wrote one in 2000 that may come out next year with the WWE, and it's really cool because it features WWE superstars. They were WWF superstars when I wrote it, as small children all living on the same block, Restful Lane. You remember me talking about it? And I did an interview with a journalist named Alex Marvez, and I had said the fact that that had not been published was the biggest disappointment in my career. And when it came out, he wrote biggest disappointment in my career, and then he wrote parentheses, writing. And then I called him up and I was like, no, it wasn't the biggest disappointment in my writing career. It was the biggest disappointment in my career, period, because it was such a good book. 2 of them, actually. And whenever I go to libraries or schools, I always bring those children's books, because unlike Christmas Chaos and Halloween Hijinks, you don't have to be a wrestling fan to get it, to enjoy it. As a matter of fact, if people are out there listening and they don't know the kids are wrestlers, then they don't know they're wrestlers, because it doesn't make a difference in the story. But yeah, I have written them, and I may write some more again sometime. Yes, sir.
I have 2 questions. Are you like a self-taught author, or did you have any formal education to write stuff?
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of self-taught. I think the fact that my mother read to me for hundreds and hundreds of hours and really encouraged me to write and to read was a big help, and that's why I dedicated the book to her. And she got all teary-eyed, went home, read the book, and never mentioned the book to me again. So I don't know how she felt about it. But I also, I was thinking of trying to find the student teacher I had when I was in first grade who had taken a big interest in my writing, because I was a very good creative writer. And when I read the stuff that I did as a kid, it really was pretty good. And it would, I think, as an educator, she'd probably like to know that she had an effect on me. But it just worked out that when that book, Have a Nice Day, that young man has there, was originally given to me as a project. We had a ghostwriter who was supposed to do the writing. And if he had been doing a good job, I would not be here talking about this novel. But I just felt like he was kind of writing a boring book. And I went upstairs into the upper deck of the Tallahassee Civic Center on May 4th, 1999, and I started writing the book. And I didn't know if it was good or not, because I thought it was good, but then again, I'd taken a lot of shots to the head. But I read it to some of the guys in the dressing room, and they were laughing and just really encouraging me to continue. So it turned out that somewhere along the line, all these things I did, the books I read, the stories I was told to me, must have had some kind of effect. Plus, I still maintain that wrestlers are storytellers inside the ring, and that probably a lot of the guys, if they tried, could come out with some pretty good stories on paper. And as long as they have someone cleaning up their punctuation and grammar, like I do, I have someone that helps me out there, then they could probably do a pretty decent job. Good question, though. Any other questions? Yes?
How did you come up with the idea for the deck that Tito does?
Oh yeah, you see, these are excellent questions. We have 3 questions, and none of them have been about the Hell in a Cell match.
That was my second question.
What do you want to know about that match?
No, actually,
I've had 1,999 other matches.
I wanted to know the second. And I don't mean to interrupt, but the second question was, who was your most formidable? Who was your nightmare in the ring?
Nightmare in a good way?
Who have you gone up against where you really didn't want to go up against?
Well, when you talk about not wanting to go up against somebody, I mean, the only reason I would not want to go up against somebody is because I thought the match would be lousy, not because I thought I was going to get hurt. The guys I looked forward to wrestling a lot were the guys, I mean, I even looked forward to wrestling Vader, which made me about the only guy. But I didn't care if I got hurt as long as the match was good. But, there were times, like when I'd see my name up on the board against Viscera, didn't do a whole lot for my, I didn't get real excited about those type of things. But I generally had a pretty good time against just about everybody. Now he wants to know about the deck of cards, because the first scene I thought of when I had this book in mind, I had it in mind for about an hour before I actually, not an hour, a year. I thought of it, an hour later I was sitting down writing it. No, it's about a year. And the first scene I had in mind is the first scene in the book, where this boy, Andy Brown, comes home, he's very sensitive, a troubled youth, 17 years old. He's had the first date with the girl of his dreams, and he's held hands for the first time, and nothing could ruin the night for him. And then he opens up the door, and there's his father exercising naked in the living room while drinking heavily. And what he's doing is he's got a deck of cards, and he turns, every time he turns the card, the number on the card will tell him how many repetitions of a specific exercise to do. He alternates between push-ups and squats. So when you do one deck, and a jack is like 11, I can't remember how it goes, queen is 12, and then something is 13, and then if you hit a joker, it's 25. So what would happen is guys, were on the road, when they were on the road and couldn't find a gym, and in a lot of cases, like when I was in Japan, you'd bring a deck of cards with you, and you'd be in the dressing room, and that's how you kept in shape, and that's where I got that. So I've known guys who have done the deck. Flair was a 2-deck guy.
Really?
Yeah, Flair and Paul Ellering were a couple of the only 2-deck guys. I was just barely a 1-deck guy. I've known wrestlers who have exercised naked. I've known wrestlers who drank heavily. But I was the guy that put all 3 of those qualities together. So. Yeah. Yes, sir.
You made a
movie appearance in ICP's Big Money Hustlers. Do you plan on doing any more?
Did you like that movie?
Yeah.
All right, get out of here. I thought it was a cameo, and then when it came out on video, I was a co-star. You know what? It was a lot of fun, but I did it so I could get my Screen Actors Guild card. But I'll tell you a real touching story, okay? I was at the Marty Lyons Foundation holiday party. Marty Lyons Foundation is kind of like Make-A-Wish, but smaller, a little more personal. And I just received this beautiful plaque in the mail like 2 months earlier, commemorating the sales of the Insane Clown Posse's Big Money Hustlers. And while I acknowledged that it was very nice, I also knew there was no way that it would ever be put up in my house. You know what I mean? But I kept it. Now, if I don't even to buy it, it wouldn't be such a nice story. But I put it in the closet, and then this boy came up to me, and he had that same affliction that the kid in the movie Mask had, although not nearly as severe. And he came up to me, he's like, Mick, I love you and Big Money Hustlers. And I said, you want to give me your address? And so he gave me his address, and I sent it out to him, and apparently he got it on Christmas Eve.
No kidding.
And his mom wrote me this letter where it just really made their Christmas, and I thought, man, here was this little tiny act of kindness, and it meant so much to the guy, you know. So it really, you know, it showed me that sometimes little things, you know, can definitely mean a lot. So there's a very, you know, first of all, I liked doing it with those guys. It was a lot of fun. I'm not exactly proud to have it on my resume, but it did result in that nice Christmas Eve moment. So just for that alone, I'm glad I did the movie. But no, I won't be in the sequel. Yes?
Congrats, wrestler. So cruel in the book. Is he patterned after any wrestlers without naming any names, but...
The reason I'm laughing is I'm looking and there's this worm coming in and out of the book. You see that? That's awesome.
Does your book do that?
No, my book doesn't have a...
He's so cool.
Yeah.
Is he patterned after some wrestlers that you've known without naming any names? I don't want to, but...
You know what? He is very cruel. Some of the things he does are exceptionally cruel, but what I think makes him a good character is that he has the potential to be a good guy, and he doesn't just... I think what's tragic about him is that, and I don't want to give it away for the other 99% of people who haven't read the book, but he doesn't just, you know, fail in his battle against his demons, but he gives up. And when he gives up completely, he really reaches for the lowest common denominator, which is the cruelty. And I think, like I said, you know, I saw some of the highs and lows, you know, when I was there in wrestling. And the truth is, you know, when you're the bad guy, it's been so long since I was a bad guy, but I was pretty good at it, you know, a long time ago. You did want to reach for those moments where you were, you know, you just went out of your way to be cruel. And those were the moments that people, you know, that people remember, and that's the type of thing that drew money. And so, you know, some of the things that he did in that book, you know, were just me remembering back when I was a heel and how would I have handled this. And I one time was offered, big, you know, Triple H was, he was a heel on his way up. And I remember the guys coming to me in WWF and asking if I wanted that spot, you know, the top heel spot. And I just said at that point, not only could my body not take it, but my mind wasn't there. Like, I didn't have that in my heart to be that mean guy anymore. And they gave Triple H a chance, and, you know, the rest is history. But it wasn't until I went and read the audio, you know, and that when I got to those parts you mentioned, the really cruel parts, and I started getting into it, you know, and I thought, you know what, I could have done that heel role, because this, not only can I do it, but it's actually a lot of fun. But yeah, I'm glad you see that, but there are moments where your stomach will just knot up when you see how bad this guy can be. Yes?
So we all know that you love your roller coasters. Who's your favorite superstar to go on a roller coaster with, and which one screams most like a girl?
Yeah, the Al Snow joke is too easy. You know, I used to love going on coasters with Owen Hart, you know, because he was so much fun, you know, and he'd pretend to be really scared on the coasters, you know. So he was the guy I loved to do them with. Scotty Too Hotty was always a lot of fun, and I really do like riding the coasters with Al. You like Scotty?
Yeah, I do.
Ah, okay.
Somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah, I've ridden coasters with a lot of the guys, but yeah, Scotty Too Hotty was a good one. You know, Al and I've probably ridden more than anybody together. Good question.
Should we take one more?
One more question, yes. Who's got a really good one? Yes.
Considering the success you had with your first 2 biographies, and you were superstitious enough that you penned this book the same way, longhand, like you did the first 2?
Yes. I don't think it has anything to do with superstition. I think it has to do with the complete lack of ability to even turn on a computer. So apparently I can't turn on computers or women. But, other than that, I'm doing all right. Okay, and that's the last question. Thank you very much for coming in.